the Ministry of Finance says the 2023 budget statement will be targeted at restoring macroeconomic stability. Let's give you a sense of what it is that we're looking at tomorrow from the perspective of government. So on your screens now, excerpts of that statement released by the Ministry of Finance indicating that in accordance with Article 179 of the 1992 Constitution and Section 21 of the Public Financial Management Act 2016, Act 91, the Minister for Finance, so it's clear now that Ken Ofori-Atta, on behalf of the President, will lay before Parliament the 2023, I should say, annual budget statement and economic policy of government on Thursday, the 24th of November, 2022. The 2023 budget will focus on government strategies to restore and stabilize the macroeconomy, build resilience, and promote inclusive growth and value creation. It will feature prominent matters, including providing an update on Ghana's engagement with the International Monetary Fund and IMF's supported program, climate change strategies, and also the You Start initiative under the Ghana Cares program. Yet to date, macro-fiscal performance of the economy, fiscal measures, and debt management strategies to ensure debt and fiscal sustainability and to promote growth. So that's the statement that we're receiving from the Ministry of Finance. Joining the conversation now is Isaac Kofi, data analyst, here with us at Joy News. Dr. Joseph Obeng is president of the Ghana Union of Traders Association, and Courage Puti is an economist. Thank you all, gentlemen, for joining us. I'd like to start off with what we are already hearing, and if that's anything to go by, then we should be in for paying more on VAT. That's the value-added tax. Kofi, help us with that. The state portal, that's Daily Graphic, I believe, is reporting that there may be some payments that we'll have to make in terms of VAT.
Well, probably
break
in
the
terms
figures
of
down.
VAT, we are already paying 12% as the rate. Formerly was a flat rate, now it's a variable rate. So the 12% is what is actually the prevailing rate. So if you are looking at any increments, probably should be above 12%, so 13 or 14. That's if government intends to actually increase the current rate. But, you know, there's research by KPMG on, it's actually referred to as the pre-budget survey. And according to KPMG, they asked respondents a very simple question. You know, are there too many taxes and yet little to show for these taxes collected? So we have 4.3% responding blessed that, you know, of the respondents said that they indicated that the government takes too many taxes and yet there is little to show for these taxes. We have 88.6% of the respondents indicated that government takes too many taxes and yet there is little to show. So
there's intolerance to this announcement that we're getting, that a lot of Ghanaians are not open to that idea.
Exactly, but if you look at the data, why would you think that government will actually be going so much or heavy on value-added tax? If you look at all the taxes on goods and services, we have about more than 5 taxes on goods and services. If you break it down and you look at what value-added tax, which is VAT, is bringing on the table in terms of revenue, it is actually the biggest component when you talk about all the other tax handles. So for this year, taxes on goods and services, we are expecting to rake in an amount of 36 billion Ghana cedis. Value-added tax will contribute to about 40.5 billion Ghana cedis in terms of the total. And if you look at the total, 36 and value-added tax alone bringing in 14.5 billion. It tells you that it's a tax handle that government really has to look at.
The statement from the Finance Ministry was silent on the thorny issue of the E-levy. We didn't talk about that.
Well, E-levy is actually not doing well. So I've been looking at data from the fiscal, the Finance Ministry's fiscal data. And if you look at the E-levy, when we started this whole engagement, we were expecting to raise an amount of 6.95 billion Ghana cedis. We revised it downwards to 4.5, then now to some 650 million Ghana cedis. So if you look at how much government has collected so far between the first and second quarter of this year, The target was 1.5 billion Ghana cedis, and we've been able to collect 93.7 million Ghana cedis.
So we're way below.
Way below.
We've
been able to collect just about 6.5% of our targets, and we are in a deficit, or we have a variance of about 1.4 billion Ghana.
Kofi, and there are more fiscal matters we need to deal with, but I need to bring in now Dr. Joseph Obeng. And Doc, thank you for spending some time with us here on the show. The statement there, giving reassurances from the Ministry of Finance that indeed there'll be macroeconomic stability going by the strategies that will be adopted. What's the key expectation of GUTA as we go into the budget presentation?
A crisis. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear, Doc.
Yes. All the three pillars upon which businesses thrive have broken. Interest rate, inflation, and exchange rate. Like the street callers said, or the interviews you did in the street, everybody seemed to know what is worrying the nation. And so what we have to do first and foremost is to stabilize these indices that I said. Inflation, we should be able to bring inflation under control. We should be able to bring measures that will stabilize the currency, and then also try also to reduce the monetary policy rate. And we are looking forward for measures, very prudent measures that will steer us to this direction. Otherwise, we will still be in a serious problem. So we expect that the finance minister is able to articulate their policy direction as to how they will be able to stabilize these indicators that is worrying the business community now. With regards to,
Oh, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, with regard to VAT, there's no uniformity. The present structure of VAT is not uniform. It does not ensure fairness. It does not ensure compliance. And that's if they do not do anything about that, there's no way they can go ahead and increase the VAT. It's not going to occur well. As it is structured now, it's creating problem in the marketplaces, let alone increasing it. So that one, we are expecting that it should be looked at, and then make it a uniform tax where it is also affordable to ensure compliance. Most times they increase these taxes and compliance is virtually nil, and that's why they do not seem to get their target. Because how long can you continue to punish the taxpayer? So taxes, if they are affordable, the compliance is very high, and you can be able to get your this thing. Because now duty is also very high. Duty is very unbearable, and that because of the exchange rate, the factors of exchange rate, it has made duty payment gone up. The increase in benchmark values that is being perpetrated on us, even though it's not legitimate. That is not a required evaluation system to be used. DRA is using this discretion to its advantage, and is making things difficult. Now, items that we used to pay 50,000 duty have moved to about 300,000, and this all compound to the cost of doing business. Yeah.
I want to bring in now, and Doc, you have to hold on for us briefly, Courage Buti, who's an economist watching all of this. And Courage, once the finance minister talks about the possibility of dealing with the IMF update, it means, therefore, that indeed government is not backing down, not at least at this point, with the IMF bailout program. So how do we juxtapose that to the expectations of the business community? You just heard from the president of GUTA indicate that the macroeconomic indicators are not favoring the private sector.
Definitely, it's been a tough year, no doubt. And 2023, we are even up against it, really. And the IMF program seemed to be the slight specter of hope going into 2023 to help us restore some macro balance and then build some fundamentals on which businesses can thrive going forward. If you look at all of the issues of 2022, I think at the heart of all of those issues would be concerns about fiscal and debt sustainability and inflation chiefly. I think these are the major issues at the heart of all of what happened, what centered to the IMF. And the IMF coming to town will really focus on some of these issues and then trying to rebuild some balances really. Typically, we had an issue with fiscal and debt vulnerability because we are not able to generate enough revenue. And then our expenditure controls were not as commensurate or were not as strong really. And so it is not surprising that we are talking about raising taxes again, even if cost of living crisis seems to be upon us and we are all struggling with the current inflation levels and the general macro conditions really. But I mean, you can't help it. Underlying this whole problem is that we are not able to generate enough, but our needs as a nation is quite large. And so rather than think of VAT, which is already quite punitive, I think we should start to do the things we haven't done in all this while.
Yeah, but Courage, sorry to disappoint you. If that's anything to go by, government is giving their posture already, looking at what the daily graphic is giving us a sense of, that we may have to pay more in terms of VAT.
Which would be quite unfortunate, but well, let's not jump the gun. I think we need to listen to the budget presentation tomorrow, but I actually think that where tax rates are, where VAT and itself is, and then the accompaniment that effectively raises that tax handle to more than the 17.5% that we are being told. If you look at it in its practicality, it becomes a bit more punitive if you want to add some more to that. And I think Guta would agree with me on that, and many other players in that sector would agree on that. I think there are a lot of untapped sources of revenue that we haven't really looked at. And I admit it's a hard work to do. Look at the informal sector, very large. And we talk about this year after year, really. But look at that mason that puts up your house for you. Look at that carpenter. Look at that plumber. Look at that hairdresser. Look at that food vendor. Look at the many other people who we see do business by the day and walk by the street. They earn so much in profits, but never really pay anything to the national kitty because we do not have a system to bring them in. What about regulating those institutions? What about licensing, like akin to what the vehicle insurance taxes do, where you could get some licensing and then I become an agent. When I contract such a person to do a work for me, I have to inspect your license that you renewed it annually before I engage you in the first place. Can we begin to think about those ways as extra avenues to raising revenue? How long can we increase corporate taxes, VAT, and the many other tax handles that are available? To what end, really? And so I think, yes, we need some low-hanging fruits. We need to rake in revenue as quickly as possible, but that should not give us the license to make cost of living even harder than it is today.
Okay.
And my expectation is that some of the policies and proposals in the budget will be cognizant of some of these positions and views, and then will not bring out something that is overly punitive for the business community than it is already.
Yeah, let's hear from the business community themselves. Dr. Obeng, the issue about taxes. Which of the handles would you want to off? If you are giving the opportunity, I'm sure that you'd say, well, let's give a leeway to the business community. But what are you on the lookout for in these trying times that will be very much pertinent in taking the burden off the business community? Dr. Obeng, if you can hear me, I was just asking about which of the key tax components are you on the lookout for?
Yeah, I must say we are in times of need that the government also needs us to pay do our bit. And so I would say that whatever we have now should be okay, and that we are not expecting another layer of cost of doing business, and that we should not compound the problem by increasing the taxes again. We are not expecting any new form of tax, neither are we expecting that the old ones are increased. We can increase the tax net like my younger brother was talking about, that we expand the tax net, that we seal the loopholes. The loopholes, we've given a hint of what is happening at the free zones what is happening at warehousing, and then the tax exemption policy that is being abused. In all these areas, the people who are abusing or taking advantage of these areas are the people who have the capacity to pay taxes. And these are people who are being left go off with these taxes. So we have to seal the loopholes. And then when we talk about increase of taxes, we don't. What we should also recognize that when we reduce expenditure, it can also enhance our revenue. Because our expenditure pattern should be prompt, and that we have to ensure value for money expenditure, and that if you overspend, and then you give a contract overprice your contracts and all that, it's not helping. So we have to prune down our expenses and all that, now that we all recognize that we are in crisis, because we cannot continue to punish the consuming public because we need taxes. How long can we go up with the tax ladder? There should be an end point somewhere, and then manage prudently the little that we have. At this stage, that's what we have to be doing. And so whatever a push that IMF may be bringing to bear, we should be able to argue our way that the Ghanaian trader or the Ghanaian taxpayer is now even overburdened. How far can we go? It will turn a point that we reach our breaking point, and then when taxes are very high, as I've already said, you don't even have the compliance for you to attain your target. And so they should look at these areas. And then with the regards with the foreign exchange directives by the Bank of Ghana, I'm expecting that the finance minister come out clearly with these timelines and then the policy directions as to the roadmaps that is set for us to be able to look within and then enhance on the productivity of the shortlisted items that we think we have potentials to increase, like the rice, like the oil, and all that. But with the statement of the Bank of Ghana is not in the right direction, in the sense that it will create panic, and then it also suggests that the rice importation or those products that have been shortlisted have been banned.
How about the E-levy? We've not heard your position. At least the More Money Merchants Association have spoken about.
I've said that we should expand the tax net. So E-levy is very much within my expectation. But then I've also said that taxes that are not affordable, the compliance level is virtually nil. That's what happened to the E-levy, and that the E-levy should be made very affordable, like 0.5. The threshold that they put about 1,100,000 Ghana should be take off, and then should be collected by the telecommunication companies, and then give the resources to government. If they do it and factor it as cost component with the communication industries, they will be able to attain their target without any stress.
Dr. Joseph Obeng, we're grateful for your time. Courage, let me wrap up with you. Your views on the E-levy, and also tie that into what it is government says is that they'll be dealing with, I guess, which has got to do with expenditure. Some have called for some critical measures. We're in the era of a haircut, so government should also be thinking about that within.
Well, yes, it is imperative, especially as we look forward to signing onto an IMF program. Beside revenue growth, you would also have to look at the expenditure and restrict it to absolutely necessary stuff. I mean, we've seen in time past that there were freezes on net freeze on employment, and there were other restrictive measures, really. What I do not envisage, like IMF will say, stop a free SHS or any of the social interventions, because IMF will encourage social spending. But to the extent that your revenue is unable to support it, then you would have to trim at some point. And that is where the conversation becomes, do I grow revenue to meet the expenditure? Do I cut expenditure to meet revenue, or do I do both so that I can have a balancing act somewhere? That is something definitely government would have to do. There is the talk about the size of the government and then the need to reduce it. I do not know exactly how much cost saving could come from that, but it's definitely something worth considering. In 2023, you could expect that we will not see another year of roads. You could expect that capital expenditure, CAPEX, could be lower than we've seen in years past, because government would have to do some consolidation in 2023 if we must restore some fiscal stability and then bring back our debt on a path of sustainability, really. And so those are broadly the things on the expenditure side they must do. We must look at the wage growth, and that is why the 60% demand of public sector workers for increase in wages, really, it's not something you can reasonably say will be granted, because the question is, where will the resources come from, especially when you can argue for and against productivity from those sectors, really. And so I think there is a big decision for government to make, but by all means, there should be some control on expenditure. On E-levy, E-levy hasn't helped anyone this year. And I guess the public dissent and the whole issues preceding its passage is actually part of the reason. Can we deal with a lower rate? Can we deal with a certain minimum threshold beyond which no E-levy will apply? Can we start to increase even the minimum value of transaction that will attract E-levy? If we did all of those and did it with a human face rather than the dogmatic approach we adopted earlier, probably we are raising more than we have so far this year, and then the outlook could have been better. I believe that instead of the 6.9 that we targeted earlier, we could have aimed for a 2 billion, 3 billion, and incrementally grow revenue from that handle. That way will make that policy acceptable to everybody, and then you will not get the withdrawal or the dissent that you got from a lot of people to that policy, really. And so now that they've had a full year data from May till say end of year, they would have seen the trends and what the growth, possibly what could be done about it are. I definitely feel that reducing the rate from the 1.5 to something lower makes sense. And I feel that just like the telcos would do, I mean, beyond 1,000 cedis, transfer charges do not apply. If we could look at something like that, even if it's not 1,000 cedis, but there is a certain minimum threshold, I mean, beyond which the E-levy will not apply, that is something that can encourage patronage of that service, and by extension, we could make a decent 2-3 billion from that every year. That is definitely a good addition to the revenue basket.
Well, this is just the prelude. We'll see what then will happen tomorrow. Courage Buchi, thank you for joining us here on The Pulse. And I just want to round everything off with Isaac Kofi, who's still looking at the figures as the finance minister goes into that presentation. Let's talk about expenditure, because that was critical to the conversation.
Exactly.
How is it looking like for us as a nation?
So the main issue here is, how are you, closing your deficit? Because when you have high expenditure and then your income or your revenue is also very low, that's when you breed this high deficit. So what government is currently doing is finding ways and means to make sure that the deficit is actually contracted to a certain level that we can actually take as a country. So if you look at the 2022, this year's budget, we were projecting to spend an amount of 137.5 billion.
Right.
It has revised downward to 135 billion. And even with that, we're still seeing deficits rising from 37 billion now to 38 billion.
So we're beyond the threshold.
Absolutely. Let me bring you this interesting statistic so we can end with. Right. So if you look at the 100 billion that we wanted to generate this year, we've revised it. We said we cannot raise 100 billion again because
of the shortfall, critical one, E-levy,
just
yes.
giving us 93 million when we were expecting 6 billion. So now we are moving from 100.5 billion now to some 96 billion or 98 billion. Now, if you generate 98 billion as a country, and just look at this, you are paying close to 35.8 billion as compensation of employees. You are paying 37.5 billion as interest payments on your debts. If you add this is about 80 billion or 70 billion Ghana cedis. And you subtract it from the 90 billion you are projecting to raise this year, that should tell you that you are in Very dense.
Isaac, don't dampen the hopes of labor unions that are already asking for a pay rise, looking at what you're telling us. But anyway, that's Isaac Ofeje, data analyst here at Joy News. We'll be looking at the labor agitations also, the demand for a pay rise. The negotiations are underway here in Accra. We'll tell you about it shortly. This is The Pulse. We'll be back shortly.